What's up, my nutbugs? It's your boy Josh from the Elestronauts, and this past weekend I got top 4 with Cypromal, but not in a way that you would expect. As you can tell by the change of scenery, I just moved, and that gave me some time to cook, and maybe I cooked a little bit too much. But as a chef myself, I wanted to share some of my cooking expertise with you by going over some of the previous lists that have even been on this channel and showing you how this theory even came to be. So, if you're looking to chef things up for the Moonrise meta, make sure to listen to everything that happens in this video, as maybe this can find the secret sauce for set 4. Speaking of Moonrise, pre-sales are right around the corner, and I think at the time of this recording, they're in like 4 days. If you want to support us here on the channel, make sure to pick up your Moonrise product from the official shop using our link in the description down below. Let's get into some of the theory for Cypromal and his bag of friends. So starting things off with what is arguably the best deck of the format, and that is Earth. One of the things that is most powerful about this deck is the fact that it is the only deck that gets to play Equilinks. And as we know, if an Equilink sticks to the board, the game is basically over from then on out. You can't set any counter runes, you can't bluff set very well, the Vis is going to connect and you are going to lose the game. Now, I wouldn't consider Earth to be a protect the castle style strategy at all, mainly because of how aggressive it has been with cards like Viscerus, Mostation, with the new inclusion of Mudlet, Elechick being able to search to meter, which is one of the most powerful divine runes in the game, alongside Zeus of course, is extremely powerful. It gets to push through a lot. It's also not hard to establish more than just the threat of an Equilinks, because again, if a Vis hits their board, you also need to deal with that as well. There are multiple threats that are going to occur every single turn. We've also seen this type of gameplay loop with a now banned card with Spark-It, where if Spark-It stuck to the field, the game was also essentially over. Equilinks has kind of filled that role with being the new strongest Nexus Elestral in the game, and it's not that hard to see why. However, there are other very powerful Nexus Elestrals, one of which got top 4 at a case tourney over in Kokomo. This is the list that got that top 4, and if you can see, there is one key Elestral that kind of fills Equilinks' job, and that is Kinleo. Kinleo also being one of the most powerful Elestrals in the game, especially post-ban list. One of the strengths of Earth was the fact that you were able to main deck all of the spirits needed for 3 Earthquake. It wasn't very hard to do since you're already playing all of those Earth spirits, where other lists may have to make concessions on their main spirit engine to take advantage of such a powerful removal card. With Earthquake now being at 1, removal's more of a delicacy at the moment. People have been resorting to cards like Boombat or Cryoblast while still playing the 1 copy of Earthquake and Laurels. I think we can all agree that Boombat is a very, very mid to bad card and only played as a necessity, not because it's good, which inspired this list. Now, I've been tinkering with Fire, Argo, Fire, Fargo. If you watch the MBT Swolax naming video,
I will say it irritates me knowing that's the one that's gonna stick.
Right?
Is
Yeah.
Calling it Fargo. Yeah.
the deck cooks. It's very good. Being able to take advantage of Nexus Banks with Necklace of Harmonia to protect your Kinleo as well, because this, unlike Earth, is a protect the castle style strategy, because if your Kinleo sticks to the field, you're more than likely going to win the game, and you're going to be able to push for insane amounts of damage every single turn by clearing the field. This list also gets to take advantage of the 3 limited cards with Lavalith, Earthquake, and Laurels without having to make a ton of concessions to the Spirit deck. Now, I know what you're going to say. A lot of people do not believe in Argo. Argo recently, though, in the past app tournament and also this past weekend, saw a lot of representation. And from personal experience, when Argo resolves, you win the game. I don't think that there's a single time that I activated Argo and I lost, with the exception of getting immediately Earthquake then Laurels back to back on the following turn. One of the biggest issues with this deck that anybody that's played this list has always brought up, and that was the fact that you had to kill your Forge 9 times out of 10 to actually abuse the Kinleo Nexus effect, or you were going to have to kill one of your other Elestrals, which never feels good, especially when you're playing into Gorgon's Gaze or the very, very niche Dense Fog. The other 1 out of 10 is you resolved an Argo, which you were going to win the game anyway. So, what did we learn from these decks? 1. Although both of them aren't necessarily protect the castle style strategies, when either a Lynx or a Kinleo, which basically serve the same function, stick to the field, you win the game. We've learned from the fire list that Argo is an extremely powerful tool that can take advantage of these Nexus Elestrals. Technically, you could even be playing Argo with Slice of Demeter for Equilinx. Both of these strategies do play Altar of Stars. However, their Nexusing capabilities sometimes come at the cost of killing your own Elestrals or using the last remaining spirits on your board to do so. Is there a way to be able to play both Equilinx and Kinleo while removing all of the weaknesses that Earth and Fire themselves have? And I think I found a way to do it. With that being said, let's take a look at my top 4 list. I do think that this list has a lot of potential moving forward. So let's talk about every single card, why it was good, why it was bad, anything that I would change, and the critical theory on the whole deck. I would also like to point out that K-Gray also brought this list to the tournament and got 9th, so there was a potential second top 8 with this deck. So here we go. Let's go over the card by card. Obviously, we wanted to be taking advantage of the most broken cards in Elestrals, which are 3 Lynx and 3 Kinleo. I apologize for the glare. There's not a whole lot I'm going to be able to do with that. I'm still working on the setup. So this is the mainstay of the deck. When these cards stick, you win the game. Obviously, these cards need a variety of Nexus banks. Typically, the ways that you were doing this were like, obviously, Forge with Kinleo and Demeter with Equilinx. So how are we going to utilize their effects to the best of their ability while making sure that the spirit math doesn't go so far off the rails and we also have the deck space? And the first card that I came up with was actually Cypromal. Cypromal has this like really weird hidden effect, and we're going to talk about all of the things that this card can do for this strategy. In case you don't know, since this card doesn't get played a whole lot, Cypromal, when it is cast, you can search your deck for a Golden Fleece and then empower the Cypromal with it, using spirits from your underworld. Now, it doesn't say that you need to use 2 solar spirits to enchant this Golden Fleece. Often, where the common play that you would do is you would already have an Equilinx or a Kinleo established with either 2 fire or earth spirits in your underworld. Then you would cast out the Cypromal, enchant the Golden Fleece with earth or fire. So that way, not only are you being able to get a Nexus bank off of your normal cast by recycling spirits from your underworld, so it's not expensive, but you also get to put 3 more spirits worth of damage onto your field because you're going to Nexus these off to the Fleece to any one of your Elestrals, sometimes even the Cypromal, to be able to pop off and swing for insane amounts of damage. I think there was one point during the tournament that I swung for 12 because he was able to set up 2 Nexus banks with an Equilinx and a Kinleo and Nexus 4 spirits to my Elestrals and swing for game. That's something that this deck does an awful lot, is just put up insane amounts of damage if they aren't able to keep up with the constant pressure that Lynx and Kinleo provide. Something to note, Cypromal also can properly enchant the Golden Fleece, and I've found that by playing this card, it is very annoying to deal with. The other thing to note about Cypromal is it's also a 1-card setup for Altar of Stars, which is another mainstay of the deck. Because we're playing so many Nexus banks with your Golden Fleece and other cards that we're going to get to in a second, Altar of Stars will almost always be live. And I've always said for a while that any deck that can play this is probably one of the best decks in the game. And I'm not saying that this is one of the best decks by any means. I think this list still needs some work. Being able to take advantage of a card so powerful as Altar is a welcome addition. So Cypromal was one of the best performing cards this weekend. However, one of the weaknesses, I'll emphasize more in a little bit, is the fact that there is Golden Fleece in the deck, because one of the weaknesses of Cypromal is it can only search and cast from deck. If you draw Golden Fleece, it is a brick. It is dead. You cannot use the Cypromal, especially if you draw both, which happens more often than you would think. Obviously, you can still cast these from hand, but we're not playing enough Solar Spirits that the effect will be live, so we'll be misenchanting these more often than not. Now, I said we're playing a lot of Nexus banks, Cypromal being one of the most powerful ones. We're also playing the Earth staple. We're playing Elechik. Now, Elechik is serving multiple facets in this list. Obviously, because Demeter is such a powerful card, we have to play her. Not only to pair along with the Equilinx, but to make sure that our Elechik is strong enough to be over things. So we still want the Elechik to represent a 7 stat line or making our Kinleo bigger because it's so small. Our Equilinks to be over things, because 9 times out of 10 we're pairing this with the Lynx. We're also playing a copy of Hephaestus, which I know has not seen a ton of play previously, but this is one of the more powerful cards in the deck. Hephaestus not only is a Nexus bank for your Kinleo, but it also searches a second Nexus bank whenever you disenchant from it. Most of the time, you're going to be grabbing something like a Scythe of Demeter off of your Hephaestus, even if you're not going to properly enchant it, just because that is generically one of the more powerful runes that you can cast on your turn, because you don't want to cast some of the other artifact, which is Necklace of Harmonia. So these are the other 2 artifacts that we're playing, Scythe and Necklace. So in general, I'll just give you the thought pattern on when to search either one of these, because your decision on which one to grab may end up determining if you win your game or not. So most of the time, if you don't open either Equilinks or Kinleo, you're going to grab Demeter, because you need the offensive pressure still. You don't need the artifacts. If you open at just Equilinks, you're going to grab Demeter. If you open just Kinleo, you'll grab Hephaestus. And if you open both of these together, you will also grab Hephaestus, because Hephaestus can get you your Scythe, which is your Nexus bank for Equilinks. Elechic bridges a lot of the gaps of this deck together, and is one of the cards that you really want to see in the early game, and if this gets Gorgons, it does really hurt. You know what, I should probably talk about what these cards do, because they don't get played a whole lot. So, Scythe of Demeter is by far probably the most powerful artifact in the entire deck, and I was able to abuse its effect multiple times throughout the tournament. And one of the things that's really good about it is it pairs really well along with Argo, which we're playing 2 copies of. So the reason that this is so strong is because of its protection against a card like Eddy. And most decks are playing Eddy or Mudlet or a variation of some type of position change. Scythe is able to protect you from both ends, because it can buff an Elestral by +2 attack and +3 defense. So even if, say, I was playing like a Nekruff or something, well we can even say Elechic in this instance. Even though it has 1 defense, it will never lose to an Eddy, because the Scythe will bump the defense up to 4. And because we're playing such a Protect the Castle South strategy, even being able to buff a Kinleo up to a 5/4 is very, very powerful, and most things won't be able to deal with that. Necklace is for the cards that you really can't defend from, especially 2-drops, or if you're getting Zeused or Demetered. So Necklace buffs the Empowered Elestral by +5 attack, which is an insane buff. The thing that's bad about this card and why you can't really play this on your turn unless you're in a very, very bad situation is because during the end phase, you have to expend 2 spirits, and if you can't, this thing's destroyed. The other thing that doesn't come up very often is you can even Argo equip Necklace to your opponent's Elestral. Say they're on like 2 spirits left, you can burn them and put them down to 0. That doesn't come up often, but it is a cool thing to do. Again, very niche, doesn't come up often, but you do need this, especially to protect your Kinleo of all things, especially because of how small it is being at 3/1. I'll just say this in passing, Argo, when it resolves, you win the game. I think that does it all for our Nexus banks. So let's just give the quick rundown of how this all works and how this looks, because we're playing a lot of Nexus banks. Every single one of the cards that you see on screen right now represents some type of Nexus material. So we're playing 4, 9, 14 Nexus banks, or cards that get us to Nexus banks. So realistically, we should never see a Kinleo or an Equilinks without one of these throughout the game, ever. I think there are plenty of times, even playing Earth, that if my Elechic gets Gorgons, and I have an Equilinks in hand, I'm going to be waiting a really long time to activate this Equilinks. And the same thing happens with Kinleo. If something happens to my Forge, if my opponent plays like their own Stadium, I have now lost my ability to Nexus with the Kinleo. And I will never have that issue in a strategy like this because of how much I am able to Nexus and have options to Nexus at any point during the game. Moving on, we were saying earlier how both Fire and Earth were able to abuse the fact that their spirit decks were native to some of the cards that recently got put on the limited list. So obviously we have to play those. We're playing Lavalith and Earthquake because we're playing Fire and Earth spirits. I'm going to get ahead of this right now. The spirit deck is extremely tight, but that doesn't mean that these can't be inclusions, and they don't really hurt the spirit math all too much. One other note, I am not playing Laurels, and one of the main reasons for that is the fact that we're playing so many Nexus banks that 9 times out of 10, we are going to have way more spirits on the field than our opponent, but we're also playing Kinleo. So we are playing 4 Earthquakes to some extent. So we're still playing more removal than most other decks are. Moving on to some of the generic engine stuff. Obviously, we're playing 3 Rabbit. You have to. Consistency. You can even call this a Nexus Bank if you want, because you can technically grab one. And then we're also playing one of the newest, most powerful cards released in Daybreak, and that's our boy Eddie. 3 Ambrosia. Shocker. Triple Gorgons. 2 Tsunami. 2 Shield. Going back to some of the other cards that we talked about earlier, we are playing 12 total counter runes. And I might bump this up even higher because I was having issue seeing any of these cards the whole day. I think any of the games that I lost were because I wasn't able to protect my Kinleo or my Equilynx. When you don't have back row, because we're not playing things that have the 5 stat line, when you run out of these, sometimes it gets a little spooky if you're not able to close out the game with insane amounts of damage. I think in the future, I might bump up the Argo to 3 and maybe even the Shield to 3. I think bumping Cypromal down to 2 might actually be correct, and bumping the Golden Fleece down to 1, and then I'm just going to say, you know what, if I draw the Fleece, the Cypromals are dead. It is what it is. Because everything else in the list feels fine. That also gives us room to play the Laurels if we wanted to still put that in the main for when we're really behind. Obviously, the 2 of ratios here feel very awkward, especially because most people max out 3, 3, 3, 3, 3 of most of them. I personally like variety because especially these 2 counter runes aren't necessarily good into every single matchup, where these 6 always are. You'll also notice the lack of Poison Tip, which is in our side deck. And the reason that we're not playing the Poison Tip is because it doesn't help our Protect the Castle strategy all that much. Having only -2 attack does mean that most things are still able to crash into a Kinleo, and even in some instances, it's still able to deal with an Equilynx in some circumstances. So although Poison Tip is a very good card, we don't really have an issue with removal, which is why Poison Tip was not put into this for the main deck. Granted, again, there are situations like going up against water that these Tsunamis 100% come out and those tips come in. It makes the side decking very easy to do, which is why I like these 2 of ratios in the main to pair along with the 12 total counter runes. So let's go ahead and talk about the spirit math real quick, because it is wonky. Let's start with the smallest amounts first. We're going to go with 3 copies of Luminape. Something you'll also notice, and this is going to be a public service announcement. I played 20 different spirits with different arts. Don't do that. It's a nightmare to manage, and I think there was a time that I thought that Illuminate was something else, and I expended it, and then I needed it later because I thought the artwork looked similar to something else that was in my spirit deck. So, point of advice, don't play 20 different arts. I learned the hard way. So, the reason that we're only playing 3 Luminape is because this is typically the spirit that you are going to expend first. That way, whenever you do draw your Cypromal, you have the option to either properly enchant the Cypromal with the Golden Fleece so it has the protection, or you can instead go for the cool Nexus plays. There are times that you don't have a Kinleo or an Equilynx on the field, but you do need the cast of Cypromal to keep board presence, so you want to make sure that you have Golden Fleece spirits live in your underworld, and that's a great way to do so by expending them early. If you mulligan, these are also the first 2 spirits that go. We're playing 3 copies of Leviathan. Again, this is for our Eddies and Tsunamis, as well as sometimes you want to do a Water Cypromal if you draw both of the Golden Fleeces. The Zaptors, we are only playing 3, even though we are playing Chick and Bunny. Sometimes there are very funny ways to get these back on the field and nexus to your rabbit. Sometimes you can have an Altar of Stars set and have a Cypromal equip a Golden Fleece with a Thunder Spirit to nexus back onto the rabbit to get those spirits back. It's a really cool play. This also sometimes lets you play around like Race to the Top, where you can nexus to an Elestral under Mount Olympus to make its defense bigger than the two things targeted, so they have to pop their own guy. Some really cool plays you can do against the Thunder matchup with even just 3 Thunder Spirits. Then we are playing 5 copies of Vapyro for our Festus, our Lavalith, and our Kinlios. Again, a lot of these spirits are getting recycled by the Cypromal. And then we are also playing just 6 copies of Teratlus to round things out with our Sith and Demeter, our Demeter. The reason we're playing 6 is because sometimes you need to go Demeter for 3. And we needed the extra Earth Spirit rather than the extra Fire, even though we are playing Lavalith. Side deck. We can now finally get into some spice. And I will talk about all the matchups that these cards are good into. I think that this has been the first side deck that I've made that felt the most complete, although not every card made it into the deck post side. So the card that I really wanted to resolve was Guardian of the Fleece. And this card was meant to punish Thunder in particular, especially Race to the Top Thunder, because both Zeus and Race to the Top target, we would be able to negate the Zeus or the Race to the Top and then pop a different card on the field. So if they go Zeus effect, we can pop the Zeus, or an Elechic or something else they have on the field. If they go Race to the Top, we can pop their Olympus. It's insane. Very expensive, but it's very cool when it resolves. We are siding the Resting on Your Laurels for decks that go really spirit crazy. Sometimes this can be Thunder, sometimes this can be Earth, especially when you're playing from behind. We're siding the 3rd shield for the matchups that this matters. This is very good against Draking in particular. Also semi-decent against wet 5s or like a water-based 5 strategy. I know the deck that won the whole thing was on a pretty sizable water package with the Galaxies and Eddies in the Wind deck. We're also playing the 1 copy of Tsunami for decks that aren't water-based. This ends up being very good for our Protect the Castle style strategy. Then we are siding 2 copies of Poison-Tipped Arrows when one of the copies that we're playing at 2, being Shield or Tsunami, aren't great. We can side both of those out and put in the 2 Poison Tips in its place. Other really cool tech options. For Draking, we're playing 2 Galaxy. If you stick this to the board, their Draking can't do anything because it goes down to 4 attack, because of 4/7. The other cards that we were playing for tower style strategies like Chronodile, Voltempest, was Heliolith. Because fun fact, Heliolith doesn't target. So even if you equip an artifact to something else, you can then just go Heliolith, effect, non-target bounce, and then you're good. Bounce back to the hand. That thing's probably never going to hit the board for the rest of the clash. Next, we're playing 2 copies of Smoltuga because this is a card that searches out Kinlio in matchups that Elestral removal is very much needed, more so than the Equilinks. You can end up siding out like an Eddie or a Cypromal, whatever you need to put this in. And the 5 defense does matter for stalling out. And then 2 Boombat because it's Boombat. Again, I'm never siding this card in. I need to find a different alternative to this dang card because it is so bad. It's so not good. I guess one other card that I think should see some experimentation in the future is Pandora's Box. This was definitely up for consideration, especially with the last app tourney having a ton of artifact box decks. Pandora's can stop the Argo. So if Argo is a main issue for your deck, I would consider this in the future, especially if post this tournament more people start maining Argo and artifact style strategies. Did I accomplish my goal of creating a list that gets to protect the castle and abuse the 2 most broken cards in this game? And I think I did. I think top 4 is pretty dang good for a list this wacky, so I am pretty happy with it. There are definitely some things that I would change. I need to find a way to lower the artifact count without lowering the Nexus banks too much, because there were plenty of times, and like the times that I lost are when I was just top decking artifact after artifact after artifact after artifact, and that feels really bad. So it is one of the weak points of a list like this. I think this deck also hard loses to critical masses of removal. I think having the limited list in the way that it is right now with Earthquake and the Laurels at 1 definitely helps a deck style like this where counter runes are the main form of removal. If we get a critical mass of Earthquakes, Laurels, or even some of the upcoming cards in Moonrise with one of the lunar phases that pops, maybe this type of deck style falls out of favor, and I think that that's okay. This deck can be kind of infuriating to play against if you don't have the perfect out. This deck will take advantage of that and just run with it and swing at you for 10. I guess one other thing to note too, it wasn't just me that had success. Like I said, Kay got 9th, and we potentially could have gotten 2 people into the top 8 with a deck like this. I think someone else just out of nowhere also happened to stumble across a very similar deck. They were playing this and some other cards. I can't remember what exactly their list was, but I played them in Swiss. So it was kind of a jump scare to see the mirror match, which was kind of awesome, kind of funny. Loved to see it. Give this deck a try. I think that it's really interesting and very fun. And I think that a list like this proves that there still are things to explore in this game. Everything's not solved. I think it's pretty clear that there are certain things that are some of the best decks and would be regardless. But if you go into past formats and past old formats and sets, there will always be something hidden in the sands that you just kind of have to uncover and experiment for yourself. As we go into Moonrise, I challenge you to find the really cool hidden synergies that some of these cards have to offer, like my boy, Cypromal, and see if you can take them to their limits. Everything's not solved. You can still find some really, really cool decks. And with that being said, that's all I got for you. Let me know your thoughts on this deck in the comments down below. And like I said, as Moonrise is almost here, make sure to use our referral code down in the description below. Like I said, it helps out the channel a ton. I wish you happy cooking. And with that being said, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.